When people talk about burning a pound of fat a day, they imagine some impossible grind, some extreme routine that only athletes can survive. But the truth is far simpler. The body already knows how to burn fat. It has done it for thousands of years. What stops it today isn't a lack of motivation. It's a system that constantly pushes insulin, traps fat inside your cells, and keeps you hungry even when you shouldn't be. If you want to burn a pound a day, you don't need complicated hacks or expensive plans. You need rules that are simple to understand but demand discipline to follow. Because fat loss isn't about doing more. It's about removing the things that keep your hormones working against you, allowing your body to finally switch from storing to burning. And once that switch flips, the results can feel almost effortless, even though the discipline behind them is anything but easy. When people think about burning fat, they often imagine a process that requires constant strain, endless workouts, or restrictive diets that drain energy and motivation. But the human body has always had a built-in mechanism for using stored fat as fuel long before modern diets and fitness plans existed. That mechanism is guided largely by one hormone, insulin. When insulin is low, the body naturally shifts into a state where fat becomes a primary energy source. This isn't a trick, a shortcut, or a secret formula. It's biology working exactly as it was designed. The issue today is that most people rarely allow insulin to fall low enough or long enough to unlock this natural fat-burning switch. Modern eating patterns, constant snacking, and foods engineered to spike glucose have created an environment where insulin stays elevated morning to night, pushing the body to store energy instead of releasing it. Understanding this process begins with recognizing that the body operates like a two-tank fuel system. One tank holds sugar, fast, immediate energy. The other tank holds fat, long-term, slow-burning energy. The problem isn't that the fat tank is broken. It's that most people never stop refilling the sugar tank. When insulin rises, the body locks the fat tank and forces you to burn only the sugar. Once that sugar runs out, instead of switching to fat, people simply eat again, raising insulin repeatedly and preventing the fuel switch from ever happening. This cycle continues day after day, year after year, creating a metabolic environment where fat isn't the problem. The inability to access fat is. When insulin stays low, the body finally opens a fat tank. Stored energy becomes available again, and the fat-burning process happens without force, without stress, and without constant hunger. But lowering insulin isn't about starving or punishing yourself. It's about aligning daily habits with the way the body runs most efficiently. When meals are spaced apart instead of constant grazing, insulin has a chance to fall. When meals contain real, minimally processed foods rather than sugar-laden snacks, insulin rises less sharply. When you eat meals that keep you full instead of triggering cravings, you naturally give the body longer periods to tap into stored fat. And when your routine respects the body's natural rhythms instead of fighting them, fat burning becomes predictable rather than confusing. These changes don't require perfect willpower. They require understanding. Once you understand how insulin governs fat storage, you stop blaming yourself and start changing the environment your body responds to. Another part of this process involves recognizing the difference between energy and appetite. When insulin is constantly elevated, people feel hungry even when they already have more than enough stored fuel. It's not true hunger. It's hormonal confusion. When insulin stays low, hunger becomes calmer, more stable, and more predictable because the body can access fat between meals. Instead of feeling desperate every few hours, you feel steady, focused, and satisfied. This is why people who lower insulin often report that fat loss feels more natural than they expected. They are no longer fighting against their own biology. Lowering insulin also has powerful effects on energy levels throughout the day instead of crashing after meals or experiencing afternoon slumps. The body maintains a steady release of fuel. Fat provides slow, sustained energy that allows longer periods of mental focus, improved mood, and better physical performance. People often think low insulin habits will make them tired, but the opposite is true. The tiredness comes from constantly burning sugar, which creates unstable energy spikes and drops. When insulin stays low and fat becomes a primary fuel, energy becomes smooth and consistent. There's also a deeper psychological benefit that appears when the body burns fat naturally. People begin to experience a sense of control that feels refreshing. They are no longer trapped in cycles of cravings, guilt, or frustration. They start to trust their body again instead of fighting against it. And with that trust comes momentum. The kind of momentum that turns small daily choices into visible physical change. The body responds quickly when insulin falls because it's finally being allowed to do what it's always known how to do. Fat loss becomes less about forcing results and more about removing the obstacles that were slowing everything down. In the end, understanding that the body burns fat naturally when insulin stays low shifts the entire mindset around weight loss. The goal isn't to push harder, but to allow the body to operate in its natural fat-burning state. When insulin drops, stored energy becomes accessible, hunger calms, energy stabilizes, and fat loss becomes a natural outcome of a hormonal environment working the way it was intended to work. People often believe that the more complex a fat loss plan is, the more effective it must be. They look for elaborate routines, detailed charts, and complicated meal structures, thinking that the answer hides somewhere inside the layers of complexity. But complexity usually becomes the very reason people give up. It overwhelms, confuses, and distracts from the fundamental principles that actually drive fat loss. In reality, the simplest rules are the ones the body responds to most consistently. The challenge isn't understanding the rules. The challenge is having the discipline to follow them day after day. Simplicity reveals the truth, while complexity disguises a lack of results. When you strip fat loss down to its essential mechanisms, you realize that the human body has a predictable rhythm, and supporting that rhythm doesn't require dozens of steps. It requires a few clear habits executed with consistency. The simplicity begins with understanding that weight loss is not a math problem. It's a hormonal one. When people get caught up counting every calorie, measuring every gram, and analyzing every small detail, they lose sight of what truly matters. The body doesn't burn fat because numbers on a chart line up perfectly. It burns fat because hormones shift into a state where fat is released instead of stored. That shift doesn't require a complicated protocol. It requires reducing the things that raise insulin, spacing out the times you eat, fueling yourself with foods that stabilize energy instead of sending it swinging. These rules don't require a manual. They require discipline. People often abandon simple steps because they seem too basic to make a difference. But the human body responds more powerfully to consistency than to complexity. Another problem with complexity is that it creates mental exhaustion. When every day demands a new rule, a new ingredient, a new technique, the brain becomes fatigued long before the body does. This fatigue leads to inconsistency, and inconsistency is a silent enemy of progress. Simplicity, on the other hand, frees mental space when you know exactly what to do and don't have to rethink it every morning. The habit becomes automatic. Automatic habits build momentum, and momentum creates transformation. A simple fasting window, a simple eating structure, a simple food guideline. These are far more powerful than chasing the latest trend or stacking layers of rules that are impossible to sustain. People who succeed in fat loss often follow extremely simple systems, not because they lack knowledge, but because they understand the value of removing friction. Every extra step is another opportunity for excuses. Every complicated rule becomes a new negotiation with yourself. The fewer negotiations you have, the more consistent you become. Simplicity eliminates decision fatigue, and decision fatigue is one of the hidden forces that destroys discipline. When your plan is simple, your mind becomes stronger because it isn't being drained by constant choices. Strength of mind is far more important than complexity of plan. Simplicity also exposes the real issue, not knowledge, but discipline. Most people already know the basic principles that help them lose fat. They know snacking isn't helping them. They know processed foods spike insulin. They know late night eating disrupts fat burning. They don't fail because they don't understand. They fail because they don't follow. A simple plan removes the distractions and excuses, making the gap between knowledge and action impossible to ignore. This clarity can be uncomfortable, but it's what produces results. When the path is simple, you can no longer hide behind confusion. The body thrives when the routine is simple. Hormones stabilize. Digestion smooths out. Hunger signals become clearer instead of chaotic. Energy levels rise because the body isn't constantly processing different foods at different times under different conditions. A simple routine acts like a reset for the metabolism. It reinforces the same signals repeatedly, teaching the body a rhythm it can follow easily. The repetition becomes the foundation of transformation. Complexity disrupts rhythm, while simplicity strengthens it. Another reason simplicity works is because it creates a sense of mastery. When you follow a simple rule repeatedly, you begin to trust yourself. You develop confidence in your ability to stay consistent. This confidence spills over into other decisions. You choose better meals, move your body more, sleep better, and avoid the habits that sabotage your progress. All because the foundation is firm. Complexity, in contrast, creates doubt. If your plan keeps changing, you never feel like you're in control. Simplicity gives you authority over your own habits, and that authority expands your discipline. People often underestimate how powerful simple, repeated actions can be. One consistent eating window can reshape hormones. One daily walk can reset cravings. One rule about avoiding processed sugar can dramatically lower insulin. These aren't complicated strategies, but their impact compounds over time. Compounding is the hidden engine of transformation. Small acts repeated consistently beat large acts performed occasionally. Complexity encourages occasional effort. Simplicity encourages daily effort. In the end, simplicity wins because the body responds to patterns, not complexity. A simple plan is easier to follow, easier to sustain, and far more likely to become a lifestyle rather than a temporary phase. The real work is not in designing a detailed program. It's in committing to a few powerful rules with unwavering discipline. Simplicity brings clarity, and clarity brings action. Complexity may feel impressive, but simplicity delivers results. People often assume that the biggest barrier to burning fat is knowledge. They think if they could just find the perfect diet, the perfect schedule, or the perfect routine, everything would finally fall into place. Yet, most people already know what they need to do. They know overeating isn't helping them. They know late-night snacking gets in the way. They know consistent habits build momentum. The gap isn't knowledge. The gap is discipline. Discipline is the invisible line between intention and transformation. It's the force that turns simple rules into real results. And while people often search for more information, more strategies, more complexity, the truth is that none of it matters without the discipline to implement it. Discipline is the part most people avoid talking about because it requires effort, discomfort, and honesty with oneself. But it's also the part that creates change that lasts. Discipline begins with accepting that motivation isn't reliable. Motivation is emotional, temporary, often tied to external triggers. Some days you feel ready to take on the world, and some days you struggle to get out of bed. If your fat loss plan depends on feeling motivated, it collapses the moment life becomes stressful or fatigue sets in. Discipline steps in when motivation disappears. It's the internal agreement you make with yourself that the rules you chose still apply even when your emotions disagree. It's the understanding that progress doesn't come from occasional intensity, but from consistent commitment, especially on the days when you least feel like it. The body doesn't respond to what you plan. It responds to what you repeatedly do. Discipline also means refusing to negotiate with yourself. You know the moment when the mind starts creating excuses. Just one snack. Just this once. I'll restart tomorrow. Those negotiations are small, but they're powerful enough to disrupt your entire rhythm. Every time you negotiate with yourself and give in, you weaken your identity as someone who follows through. Discipline removes negotiation from the equation. The rule is the rule. The plan is the plan. You don't rethink it every day. You follow it because you decided it matters. The fewer negotiations you allow, the faster your results accelerate. People who transform their bodies aren't stronger or smarter. They simply stop debating with themselves. Another part of discipline is recognizing the difference between discomfort and danger. When people feel hungry, tired, or restless while changing their habits, they often interpret as a sign something is wrong. But discomfort is part of transformation. The body resists change at first because it has grown accustomed to convenience. Hunger cues become exaggerated, cravings become louder, and old habits try to reclaim control. Discipline is the ability to sit with that discomfort without panicking or quitting. It's the understanding that the body is adapting, not suffering. When you allow your body to push through the early resistance, the discomfort fades and a new baseline forms. This is when discipline transitions from struggle to strength. Discipline also builds identity. At first, it feels like something you have to force. But over time, disciplined actions shape the way you see yourself. When you consistently keep your commitments, even small ones, you begin to believe you're someone who follows through. That identity becomes a source of confidence and calm. You no longer rely on motivation because your actions align with who you believe you are. This shift in identity is one of the most powerful drivers of long-term fat loss. When you see yourself as someone disciplined, your daily decisions naturally support that identity without forcing it. Another important aspect of discipline is protecting your environment. People often think discipline comes from willpower alone, but willpower is a limited resource. Your environment influences your habits far more than you realize. If your home is filled with unhealthy food, discipline becomes a daily battle. If your routine is chaotic, discipline becomes fragile. If your social circle encourages unhealthy habits, discipline becomes draining. Discipline is not only about resisting temptation, it's about designing an environment where temptation rarely appears. The fewer battles you face, the more consistent you become. Discipline also thrives on structure. When your day has a predictable rhythm, your habits become easier to maintain. Fixed meal windows, planned routines, and consistent sleep patterns create stability, and the body responds positively to stability. A structured routine eliminates randomness, and randomness is the enemy of progress. When you follow the same simple rules every day, your body adjusts, your hormones balance, and your discipline strengthens. Structure makes discipline feel less like effort and more like your natural way of living. Finally, discipline is built on the understanding. The results come from repetition, not perfection. People often sabotage their own progress by chasing perfection. One imperfect day leads to guilt, and guilt leads to abandoning the plan altogether. Discipline isn't about flawless execution. It's about returning to the plan every time you drift. The ability to restart without emotion, without judgment, and without delay is one of the most powerful expressions of discipline. It's what turns a temporary effort into a permanent lifestyle. When you commit to simple rules and practice discipline consistently, your body responds with predictable fat loss because you're finally giving it the stability and structure it needs to operate at its best. Most people grow up believing that the key to weight loss is counting every calorie, tracking every bite, and constantly monitoring the numbers on a plate. They learn to fear food instead of understanding it. But the body doesn't run on math the way a spreadsheet does. It runs on hormones, rhythms, and metabolic signals that decide whether you store energy or burn it. This is why two people can eat the same number of calories and experience completely different results. What matters far more than the total amount of food is the timing of when you eat. Eating windows, the periods of the day when you allow the body to take in calories, have a powerful influence on hormone levels, especially insulin. When you're constantly grazing throughout the day, even on healthy foods, you keep insulin elevated, and elevated insulin locks fat away. When you shorten the window and give your body a long period without food, insulin drops and the body finally gets access to its stored energy. Again, this concept is simple but counterintuitive because people have been told for years that skipping meals slows the metabolism or that eating small meals every few hours is better. In reality, the opposite is true for most people struggling with weight. Constant eating keeps the body in storage mode. The more frequently you eat, the more spikes in insulin you create, and the less time your body has to switch into fat-burning mode. A structured eating window, whether it's 12 hours, 10 hours, or shorter, gives your metabolism clarity. Instead of constantly bouncing between feeding and digesting, your body settles into a predictable rhythm. It knows when to store energy and when to release it. This rhythmic pattern is far more effective than micromanaging every single calorie. Eating windows also simplify life. Instead of obsessing over every food choice, every portion size, and every detail, you create a simple rule: eat during certain hours, and don't eat outside them. This gives your mind a rest from constant decision-making. It reduces the temptation to snack out of boredom or stress. It gives you clear structure, and structure creates discipline. Without structure, discipline becomes fragile and easy to break. But when you follow the same window every day, your body adjusts. Hunger signals become more stable. Cravings become weaker. The periods of fasting become easier because your hormones learn the new pattern. The body adapts faster than most people expect once a routine becomes consistent. Another important part of eating windows is how they influence hunger. Most people assume that if they go too long without eating, they'll become ravenously hungry. But hunger operates in waves, not in straight lines. When you skip constant snacking, hunger actually becomes more predictable and far less chaotic. Ghrelin, the hunger hormone, rises around the times you usually eat. When you shorten your eating window, your hunger adapts to that window. This is why people often report that fasting becomes easier after the first few days. The body learns a new schedule quickly, especially when insulin begins to stabilize. When insulin is low, hunger becomes calmer, making the entire process feel more manageable. Eating windows also give the body time to repair. When you aren't constantly digesting food, your body can shift energy toward healing, cleaning out damaged cells and improving metabolic flexibility. Digestion is one of the most energy-intensive processes the body performs. When you're eating from morning to night, your body spends most of its time in digestion mode, leaving little energy for repair. A proper fasting window allows your system to reset, reduce inflammation, and improve insulin sensitivity. Better insulin sensitivity means the body needs to produce less insulin for the same foods, which further supports fat burning. Another powerful benefit of eating windows is the control they give you over evening eating habits. Late night eating is one of the biggest contributors to weight gain because the body is less insulin sensitive at night. Calories eaten late are processed differently from calories eaten earlier in the day. When you create a strict cutoff time, you eliminate late night snacking, which is often driven not by hunger, but by stress, fatigue, or boredom. This alone can create dramatic changes in fat loss because you're no longer interfering with your body's natural overnight hormonal cycles. Eating windows also help regulate energy levels. When your body knows it will have a long period without food, it becomes more efficient at using fat for fuel. This provides a steadier energy supply compared to relying on frequent carb-based meals. People often report feeling more alert, more focused, and less sluggish when they stop grazing all day. Instead of constant glucose spikes and crashes, the body uses stored energy in a slow and steady way. This stabilizes mood, improves productivity, and eliminates the energy roller coaster many people think is normal. One of the biggest advantages of eating windows is that they allow you to eat until you're satisfied during your meals without guilt. Instead of nibbling all day, you eat intentionally during a fixed window. This creates a cleaner separation between eating time and fasting time. It reduces emotional eating, breaks the habit of unconscious snacking, and helps you develop a healthier relationship with food. You stop using food to fill every gap in your day and start using it for nourishment. Ultimately, eating windows are more powerful than counting calories because they work with your biology, not against it. They give your body the environment it needs to lower insulin, access stored fat, and maintain stable energy. The simplicity of eating windows doesn't make them easy, but it makes them sustainable. And sustainability is the foundation of long-term fat loss. When you stop focusing on eating all day and start focusing on structured windows, the body finally has the opportunity to burn fat the way it was designed to do. So, every day begins long before your first meal, long before your first decision, and long before you even realize your habits have already taken shape. The morning is the starting point of your hormonal rhythm, and what you do in the first hours of the day can either support fat burning or sabotage it without you noticing. People often underestimate how much morning routines influence hunger, energy, cravings, and metabolism throughout the rest of the day. They focus on what they eat later, but forget that the body follows patterns. When the morning is chaotic, rushed, or filled with sugar and stress, the body spends the rest of the day trying to catch up. A powerful morning routine isn't about perfection or complexity. It's about setting a hormonal tone that allows your body to burn fat instead of storing it. The first major influence in the morning is cortisol, a hormone that naturally rises as you wake up. Cortisol isn't the enemy. It helps mobilize energy, boosts alertness, and prepares you for the day. But when the first thing you do is eat something sugary or refined, that natural cortisol rise pairs with sharp insulin spike, and the combination encourages fat storage rather than fat burning. This creates a pattern where your appetite becomes more unstable, cravings increase, and your energy fluctuates. But when you begin the morning with stability, hydration, sunlight, movement, or fasting, cortisol works with your body, not against it. You begin the day in a fat-burning state instead of being pushed into storage mode immediately. Another reason morning routines matter is because the body is incredibly sensitive to signals during the first few hours of the day. Your metabolism is like wet cement in the morning. It quickly forms impressions that last for the next 12 to 16 hours. When you begin with mindful habits, the rest of your day tends to follow that direction. When you start with impulsive habits, your decisions later become more chaotic. This is why many people find that once they break their morning rhythm, they spend the rest of the day battling cravings or overeating. The morning sets a pattern. If the pattern begins strong, you need far less willpower later because your hormones and habits are aligned. Movement in the morning is another powerful tool that influences fat burning. You don't need an intense workout. Even light walking or stretching signal to the body that it should release energy rather than hold on to it. Gentle movement lowers insulin, improves blood flow, and wakes up your metabolism. It also reduces stress, which is important because stress hormones can push you toward emotional eating later in the day. When you start the day with movement, you shift your body into a more balanced state, making it easier to maintain discipline throughout the day. The body becomes more insulin sensitive after movement, meaning you process food more effectively and avoid the sharp spikes that trigger fat storage. Hydration in the morning is another overlooked factor. Many people wake up slightly dehydrated, which can be easily mistaken for hunger. Drinking water first thing helps regulate appetite, supports digestion, and activates metabolic processes. Even something as simple as a glass of water before anything else allows the body to normalize after a night of fasting. When you hydrate before you eat, you reduce overeating, support energy levels, and maintain hormonal balance. These are small steps, but they create momentum. Sunlight exposure early in the day also affects metabolism in a way people rarely consider. Morning sunlight regulates circadian rhythms, the internal clock that governs hormone release, appetite timing, and energy levels. When your circadian rhythm is aligned, hunger appears at the right time, sleep improves, and cravings decrease. When it's misaligned, you feel hungrier than you should, more tired in the afternoon, and more likely to snack at night. Even a few minutes of sunlight in the morning can reset these rhythms and guide your metabolism into a healthier pattern. Skipping breakfast or delaying your first meal can also be a powerful part of the morning routine. When you give your body additional fasting hours, insulin stays low and fat burning continues from the night before. This doesn't mean breakfast is bad. It means timing matters. If your goal is fat loss, extending the morning fasting period often creates a hormonal environment that works in your favor. Many people feel more focused, more energized, and more in control when they delay food until later in the morning. Hunger naturally adapts to the new pattern, making it easier to stay consistent. Another key element of a strong morning routine is avoiding mental clutter. When the first moments of your day are filled with stress, rushing, scrolling, reacting, your mind becomes scattered. Scattered thinking leads to scattered eating choices. But when your morning has intentional steps, you create a sense of order that carries into your decisions about food. Discipline becomes easier because your mind is stable, not overwhelmed. Calm mornings lead to calm hormones, and calm hormones lead to fewer cravings. The morning also sets the emotional tone for the day. Food choices are often emotional choices. And if you begin your day feeling rushed, overwhelmed, or unfocused, that emotional chaos leaks into how you eat. A stable morning, even a simple one, reduces emotional eating later. Whether it's a short walk, mindful breathing, journaling, or just sitting quietly with a warm drink, that moment of intentional calm sends a message to your body that it is safe. When the body feels safe, it doesn't crave comfort foods. It doesn't seek immediate dopamine hits. It instead follows the patterns you created. A powerful morning routine doesn't require perfection, intensity, or complexity. It requires consistency. When your morning supports your hormones, your metabolism responds with steady energy, reduce hunger, and improve fat burning throughout the entire day. The morning becomes the anchor that keeps you grounded, disciplined, and aligned with your fat loss goals. It shapes the rhythm your body will follow and strengthens your ability to stay on track without constant effort or overwhelming willpower. Cravings are one of the biggest reasons people break their rhythm and lose consistency. They appear suddenly, feel urgent, and convince you that you need food even when your body has plenty of stored fuel available. Most people assume cravings are about willpower, but cravings are rarely emotional weaknesses. They are biological signals, and often they are signals of imbalance. When certain hormones are unstable, when blood sugar is fluctuating, when sleep is disrupted, or when stress is high, cravings become louder and more persuasive. To burn fat consistently, you don't fight cravings, you understand them. When you understand the triggers behind cravings, you regain control because you can correct the imbalance instead of battling the urge over and over again. One of the most common causes of cravings is unstable insulin. When you eat foods that spike insulin, refined carbohydrates, sugary snacks, constant grazing, your blood sugar rises quickly and then crashes just as fast. That crash creates a powerful craving for quick energy. It feels like hunger, but it isn't true hunger. It's a reaction to unstable blood sugar. When your eating pattern is inconsistent when you snack late at night, or when your meals are built around easily digestible carbohydrates, these cycles happen multiple times a day. Each crash becomes a craving, and each craving pushes you to eat more often, which raises insulin again and prevents fat burning. By stabilizing insulin through a structured eating window and nutrient-dense meals, cravings begin to fade because the hormonal roller coaster stops. Sleep is another major driver of cravings. When you don't sleep well, your hunger hormones ghrelin and leptin get thrown out of balance. Ghrelin increases, making you feel hungrier, and leptin decreases, making you feel less satisfied after eating. This combination is dangerous because it creates cravings that feel impossible to ignore. Lack of sleep also increases cortisol, and cortisol raises insulin resistance. When cortisol is high and sleep is low, cravings for quick energy are usually sugar become overwhelming. Many people try to fix cravings with food. When the real fix is improving sleep with consistent restorative sleep, the body becomes calmer. Hunger signals become clear, and cravings weaken significantly. Stress is another powerful trigger. When you feel stressed, your body seeks comfort, and the fastest source of comfort is food, especially foods that provide immediate dopamine, sweets, salty snacks, processed carbohydrates. Stress raises cortisol, which increases the desire for quick energy. This is why people often crave food even when they're not physically hungry. It's not the body asking for fuel, it's the brain asking for relief. Managing stress doesn't mean eliminating challenges. It means creating small habits that help the body relax. Deep breathing, walking, journaling, sunlight exposure, or even moments of stillness. When stress drops, cravings drop. Many cravings disappear not because you resisted them, but because the trigger behind them faded. Another overlooked cause of cravings is dehydration. Many people confuse thirst with hunger. When you haven't had enough water, the body sends signals that can feel almost identical to food cravings. A simple glass of water can reduce cravings within minutes. Hydration also supports digestion, circulation, and mental clarity, all of which reduce the unnecessary urges to eat. The body functions best when water intake is consistent, not occasional. When you hydrate throughout the day, cravings become quieter and easier to manage. Cravings also emerge from habit loops. The brain loves routine. And if you have spent years reaching for snacks at certain times after dinner, during TV mid-afternoon, your brain expects it like clockwork. These cravings aren't physical. They're automatic patterns the mind has repeated so many times that they feel natural. The key to breaking these loops is replacing them, not just removing them. If your brain expects a snack at 9 p.m., change the behavior to something else. Tea, stretching, reading, a short walk over time. The old craving loses its power because the brain adapts to the new pattern. When you shift the habit, you shift the craving. Another important factor is nutrient imbalance. If your meals are low in protein or healthy fats, hunger and cravings return quickly. Protein provides satiety. Healthy fats stabilize hormones. Fiber improves digestion and slows the absorption of glucose. When these elements are missing, cravings rise. When meals are built with intention, protein first, then healthy fats, then complex foods, the body stays satisfied longer, insulin rises less, and the energy remains steady. This design reduces the biological drive to eat between meals because your body remains fueled. Cravings can also appear during transitions. When you first start fasting or reduce snacking, your body reacts because it's used to constant food intake. This isn't failure, it's adaptation. Cravings are strongest at the beginning because the body is shifting from sugar dependence to fat burning. Once insulin stabilizes and the body begins using stored energy, cravings drop dramatically. The first few days are about letting the body switch its fuel source. The cravings fade as soon as the switch becomes consistent. Understanding cravings gives you freedom. Instead of fighting urges with sheer willpower, you learn to adjust sleep, stress, hydration, meals, and routines. You gain the ability to predict cravings before they appear. When they do show up, you recognize them not as emergencies, but as signals. With time, cravings lose their authority. They no longer control your schedule, your mood, or your eating choices. You become the one who decides when you eat and why you eat. And that control is one of the strongest foundations for long-term fat loss because it creates a stable hormonal environment, a calmer mind, and a body that runs on intention rather than impulse. Real hunger and habitual cravings look similar on the surface, but they come from completely different places in the body, and learning to distinguish them is one of the most powerful skills you can master when you're trying to burn fat consistently. Real hunger builds slowly, almost like a gentle wave rising over time. It's your body's genuine signal that it needs fuel, that your energy stores are dipping, and it's appropriate to eat. Habitual cravings, on the other hand, come fast, sharp, and usually tied to a cue: boredom, stress, habit, routine, or even just a clock striking a certain hour. And in a world full of constant food availability, endless snacking culture, and high insulin traps hiding in plain sight, it's easy to mistake emotional impulses for biological hunger. Once you begin to understand the difference, your entire rhythm with eating changes because you're no longer responding to every urge that pops up, and your body finally gets a chance to tap into its fat stores instead of constantly being interrupted by unnecessary snacks and sugar hits. Real hunger doesn't demand specific foods. It doesn't say, "I need chocolate," "I need chips," or "I need that exact thing in the fridge." It simply says, "I'm ready for nourishment." But cravings always have a story attached. They come with an emotion, a memory, or a ritual. Many people feel cravings not because their body needs energy, but because their brain is seeking comfort, distraction, stimulation, or routine. People crave sugar when stressed because the brain has learned that sugar brings a quick dopamine spike. People crave salty snacks at night, not because they're truly hungry, but because the body associates that time with relaxation routines or TV habits. And when insulin has been running high for a long time, your hunger cues get even more confusing because your body is storing energy but not accessing efficiently, which makes you feel hungry even when you already have plenty of energy stored as fat. Cravings usually disappear when ignored for a few minutes. You repeat simple actions every day. They send signals to your metabolism, your hormones, your appetite, and even your brain chemistry. Over time, these signals become stronger than old habits, stronger than cravings, stronger than the pull of inconsistency. Fat loss stops being a battle of willpower and becomes a rhythm you fall into naturally. This is where the power of small rules comes in because they bypass overwhelm and lock you into a structure that your body can trust. One of the most important aspects of building momentum is removing decision fatigue. Every unnecessary choice costs energy. If you spend the day debating when to eat, what to eat, how much to eat, and whether today counts, you drain the mental fuel you need to stay consistent. But if you set simple rules like eating within a certain window, avoiding snacks, drinking water before meals, pausing before responding to cravings, you take away the constant negotiation. The body relaxes into predictability, and your metabolism follows. A rule doesn't require motivation. A rule doesn't ask how you feel today. A rule doesn't make you guess. It simply guides your day. And each time you follow it, Your identity shifts towards someone who follows through. These daily rules don't need to be complicated. In fact, when they're too complicated, they collapse under pressure. The real power lies in rules, so simple you can apply them even on your worst days. A consistent morning routine, for example, sets the hormonal tone for the rest of the day. Drinking water, avoiding early sugar, delaying your first meal, or stepping into sunlight. All of these are tiny habits that influence cortisol, insulin, appetite, and energy. Repeat them often enough, and they stop feeling like effort. They become the autopilot settings of your life. And when your autopilot is aligned with fat loss, results accumulate whether you're thinking about them or not. Consistency also builds confidence. Every time you stick to a rule, no matter how small, you reinforce a belief that you are capable of discipline. This creates a positive feedback loop. When you follow through, you feel capable. When you feel capable, you follow through even more. Many people struggle with fat loss because they don't trust themselves after years of starting strong and giving up. Small rules rebuild that trust. They create wins that stack day after day. And those wins transform your mindset long before the physical changes become visible. Fat loss becomes a byproduct of the identity you're building, not the sole focus of your effort. Small rules also stabilize your blood sugar and insulin levels far more effectively than sporadic big actions. Even something as simple as not eating between meals give your body uninterrupted time to lower insulin, so fat burning can actually occur. People often underestimate how much constant snacking prevents progress, not because of the calories, but because of the hormonal spikes. A tiny rule like no eating after dinner can create hours of low insulin time every night, and over weeks and months the effect compounds. You begin waking up lighter, less bloated, naturally less hungry because your body is finally getting consistent metabolic signals instead of being bombarded all day. Momentum grows because the body loves rhythm. Hormones love rhythm. Digestion loves rhythm. Sleep loves rhythm. Fat loss is easier when everything inside you is synchronized, and this synchronization comes from repetition, not intensity. Think of it like water carving stone. The force doesn't come from dramatic pressure. It comes from steady, repeated flow. In the same way, your small rules carve new metabolic pathways, retrain hunger cues, calm inflammation, lower insulin, and weaken old reward circuits in the brain. What once felt difficult starts feeling natural. What once felt restrictive starts feeling free. And when the rules are simple enough to follow anywhere in busy weeks, stressful days, travel, celebrations, low-energy moments, you create a lifestyle instead of a temporary push. Fat loss becomes inevitable because it's not dependent on perfect conditions. It's driven by a structure that continues even when life gets chaotic. These rules become a foundation you stand on when motivation fades, when cravings appear, when old habits try to pull you back. Momentum is not built in a day, but it is built daily. And when your daily actions remain steady, the cumulative effect transforms your body in ways that extreme bursts of effort never will. Sleep and stress control are often overlooked in fat loss strategies, yet they are among the most powerful and underestimated factors in determining whether your body burns fat efficiently or stores it stubbornly. People tend to focus solely on calories, workouts, and eating windows, assuming that if those are in order, everything else will fall into place. But hormones are the true regulators of fat loss, and sleep and stress directly influence those hormones in ways most people never notice. Lack of sleep and chronic stress both elevate cortisol, which in turn raises insulin and encourages the body to hold on to fat, especially around the belly. When you combine poor sleep with high stress, you create a hormonal environment that actively resists fat loss. No matter how disciplined your diet appears on paper, sleep is a foundation. During deep restorative sleep, the body repairs itself, balances hormones, and optimizes metabolic function. Growth hormone, which plays a role in fat metabolism, peaks during deep sleep. Leptin, the hormone that signals satiety, is produced while you sleep. Without adequate sleep, leptin drops, ghrelin, the hunger hormone rises, and the result is a body that feels hungry even when it doesn't need energy. This imbalance drives cravings for high sugar, high-fat foods, which elevate insulin and halt fat burning. Sleep deprivation also decreases insulin sensitivity, meaning the body struggles to process nutrients efficiently. What this creates is a vicious cycle. Poor sleep leads to hormonal imbalance, which increases cravings and fat storage, which in turn can make sleep quality worse. Breaking that cycle is critical if you want fat loss to happen predictably and sustainably. Stress works in a similar, but often more insidious way. When the body experiences stress, cortisol rises. Acute stress is normal and even helpful in small doses, but chronic stress keeps cortisol elevated for long periods. Elevated cortisol triggers insulin resistance and increases appetite, particularly for quick energy foods like sweets and refined carbohydrates. It also directs the body to store fat in more dangerous areas, such as the abdominal cavity. People under chronic stress may eat more, move less, and feel more fatigued. But even if they maintain a healthy diet and exercise regularly, high cortisol can still sabotage fat-burning efforts. Stress doesn't just influence behavior. It alters physiology in ways that are invisible until you notice the cumulative effect on weight, energy, and metabolic health. The interaction between sleep and stress is especially powerful. Poor sleep increases cortisol, and high stress reduces sleep quality, creating a loop that magnifies a problem. Even a single night of disrupted sleep can lower insulin sensitivity the next day, spike hunger hormones, and make cravings almost impossible to resist. Multiply that over weeks and months. And it's no surprise that many people struggle to lose fat despite their best intentions. The key is to treat sleep and stress not as optional luxuries, but as critical rules that determine whether your body will cooperate with fat-burning efforts or resist them. Practical strategies to control stress and optimize sleep do not have to be extreme. Simple, consistent habits can create profound changes. Sleep hygiene, for example, involves maintaining a regular bedtime, reducing exposure to blue light in the evening, keeping the bedroom cool and dark, and avoiding late-night meals or stimulants. Even small improvements like going to bed 30 minutes earlier or reducing nighttime screen exposure can improve hormone regulation dramatically. Stress management is equally about consistency. Practices such as mindful breathing, journaling, walking in nature, or short meditation sessions reduce cortisol and improve mental clarity. Over time, these small daily interventions compound, reducing cravings, stabilizing insulin, and creating an environment where fat burning can occur naturally. Another critical point is that quality matters as much as quantity. 8 hours of restless, interrupted sleep may not be as beneficial as 6 hours of deep restorative sleep. Chronic stress that is constant but low-grade can be more damaging than acute but short-lived stress. The body responds to the overall pattern, not just individual events. By intentionally improving both sleep and stress, you create a cumulative effect that reinforces all other fat loss strategies. Insulin becomes more stable, hunger signals become more predictable, energy becomes steady, and the brain is able to make better decisions about food and activity. Sleep and stress control also reinforce discipline in other areas. When you are well rested and calm, adherence to eating windows, movement routines, and small daily rules becomes easier. Cravings diminish because the body is no longer in survival mode. Mental clarity improves, which allows you to resist environmental triggers and habit loops more effectively. Your body stops fighting your intentions because you have created the conditions for it to operate efficiently. Fat loss becomes a natural outcome of the lifestyle rather than a constant battle against biology. Addressing sleep and stress may not feel as urgent or exciting as a new diet trend or a workout challenge, but their impact is profound and accumulative. These two factors regulate the very hormones that determine whether fat is stored or burned, whether appetite is controlled or chaotic, and whether energy is stable or erratic. By creating consistent, supportive routines around sleep and stress, you allow the body to function as it was designed, giving every other fat loss effort a chance to succeed. These foundations set the stage for predictable, sustainable results that are far more powerful than short-term fixes or extreme measures. The metabolism is often misunderstood in the context of fat loss. Many people think it's a fixed rate, something you are born with that either works for or against you. They believe that losing fat is purely a matter of burning more calories than you consume, and that if the metabolism is slow, they are doomed to struggle forever. The truth is that metabolism is adaptable, responsive, and trainable. It responds to the signals you give it every day, especially through food, activity, sleep, and stress management. Understanding this allows you to take control because your metabolic rate is not a rigid number. It is a reflection of your habits, your hormonal environment, and the consistency with which you apply rules that support fat burning. Metabolic flexibility is the body's ability to switch between fuel sources efficiently. A person with high metabolic flexibility can burn fat when food is unavailable and switch to glucose when carbohydrates are consumed. Many people have lost this flexibility due to constant snacking, high sugar intake, and elevated insulin levels. When insulin remains high, the body struggles to access stored fat, which creates a state where energy feels scarce despite abundant fat reserves. Rebuilding metabolic flexibility requires creating periods where insulin is low and the body is encouraged to burn stored energy. This doesn't require extreme fasting or severe restriction. It requires simple, consistent patterns that signal to the metabolism that it can trust fat as a fuel source. Once the body learns that fat will be available for energy, it becomes far more efficient at using it, which accelerates fat loss and stabilizes energy throughout the day. Activity is another key factor in training the metabolism. Many people overestimate the number of calories burned during exercise, while underestimating the hormonal benefits that movement provides. Exercise, especially resistance training and high-intensity intervals, signals to the body to maintain lean muscle mass, which in turn increases resting energy expenditure. Muscle tissue is metabolically active. The more lean mass you maintain, the higher your baseline calorie burn, even at rest. But beyond calories, movement improves insulin sensitivity, enhances mitochondrial efficiency, and increases metabolic flexibility. Daily movement doesn't need to be extreme. Even walking, stretching, or light resistance work consistently over time trains the body to burn fuel more effectively and supports fat loss in a predictable manner. Nutrition plays a crucial role in metabolic training. The timing of meals, the composition of macronutrients, and the avoidance of processed high glycemic foods all influence how the metabolism functions. Eating nutrient-dense, minimally processed meals with adequate protein, healthy fat, and complex carbohydrates stabilizes insulin and reduces unnecessary cravings. This allows the body to use stored fat between meals instead of relying on constant energy from food. Structured eating windows, where the body experiences periods without food, signal that energy can safely come from fat reserves, reinforcing metabolic adaptability. Over time, the metabolism becomes less reactive to every snack and more efficient at tapping into stored energy. Sleep and recovery are equally important in training metabolism. Poor sleep disrupts hormone balance, increases cortisol, reduces leptin, and elevates ghrelin, creating a body that craves food and holds on to fat. Chronic fatigue slows resting energy expenditure and decreases the effectiveness of physical activity. Stress management likewise keeps cortisol under control, reducing insulin resistance and preventing fat from being stored unnecessarily. When sleep and stress are addressed consistently, the metabolism operates at a higher level because the body is able to repair itself, maintain muscle mass, and regulate energy use effectively. One of the most powerful aspects of metabolic training is consistency over intensity. Many people chase short-term extremes thinking that dramatic action will create dramatic results. In reality, the body responds best to patterns that are repeated reliably. Daily rules that stabilize insulin, maintain movement, improve sleep, and manage stress cumulatively increase metabolic efficiency. Small actions, when repeated consistently, compound into profound results. The metabolism adapts, becoming more efficient, more flexible, and more responsive to the strategies you employ. This is why slow, consistent change often outperforms bursts of extreme effort that are unsustainable over time. Another factor to consider is the role of hormones beyond insulin. Thyroid function, growth hormone, and cortisol all interact with metabolism and fat-burning capacity. Supporting these hormones through balanced nutrition, proper rest, and consistent daily habits amplifies the body's ability to utilize stored energy. Ignoring these signals or relying solely on calorie counting fails to address the underlying physiology. Fat loss is not a punishment to the body. It is a signal that the metabolism has been trained to function efficiently under the conditions you provide. Metabolic training is not just about burning calories today. It's about creating an adaptable, efficient system that works consistently over months and years. The body responds to repeated cues, building patterns that reinforce itself. When you train the metabolism properly, hunger stabilizes, energy steadies, cravings diminish, and fat becomes accessible without struggle. It is this adaptability that allows you to maintain fat loss long term, instead of cycling through temporary results and setbacks. Finally, mindset and consistency play a role in reinforcing metabolic efficiency. The body responds to what you repeatedly do, not to what you occasionally attempt. Understanding that metabolism is trainable shifts the focus from quick fixes to sustainable strategies. Small daily actions compound into a system that supports fat burning naturally. Over time, the metabolism itself becomes an ally and fat loss becomes a predictable outcome of consistent habits, structured patterns, and disciplined routines that you've built into your life. Accountability is often seen as a motivational tool, something external that pushes people to act. But true accountability begins within. It is the internal agreement you make with yourself to follow the rules you've set even when no one is watching. Most people fail in fat loss not because they don't know what to do, but because they don't enforce their own standards consistently. Every small compromise, every unexamined choice chips away at the structure that creates results. The body doesn't respond to excuses or intentions. It responds to actions repeated over time. When you take full responsibility for your habits, you remove the external blame and create a direct connection between what you do and the outcomes you experience. This clarity transforms the way you approach fat loss because it eliminates confusion, denial, and negotiation. Self-accountability also requires honesty. Many people think they are following a plan when in reality they are bending rules or rationalizing exceptions. Skipping a meal, grabbing a snack, or delaying exercise might feel minor, but over days and weeks, these small inconsistencies accumulate into stalled progress. Honest self-assessment creates awareness. When you track actions, reflect on choices, and acknowledge where you fell short without judgment, you gain control over patterns rather than letting them control you. Accountability isn't about perfection. It's about seeing reality clearly and responding with intention. It transforms fat loss from a guessing game into a predictable process because the rules are enforced consistently. Another critical component of accountability is creating measurable checkpoints. Small, repeatable actions should be evaluated regularly to ensure alignment with your goals. This doesn't mean obsessively weighing yourself or counting calories, but rather checking in on behaviors that directly influence outcomes. Are you following your eating window? Are you moving consistently? Are you managing stress and sleep? Each checkpoint reinforces a connection between daily habits and long-term results. It strengthens internal commitment because you see tangible evidence that your actions either support or hinder your progress. Accountability provides feedback loops that are immediate, actionable, and entirely within your control. Consistency is reinforced by accountability because it creates an unbroken chain of action. When you know you are responsible for your habits, there is less room for negotiation or excuse. Skipping a meal or breaking a fast is no longer just a day, but a conscious choice with clear impact on your goals. When every decision is acknowledged internally, the cumulative effect of small rules becomes visible. This reinforces the understanding that results are built incrementally, not in dramatic bursts. Accountability keeps you tethered to plan even when motivation fluctuates or challenges arise. Support systems can enhance accountability, but they are not a substitute for it. Coaches, friends, or communities provide encouragement and external observation, but the true driving force is internal. Relying solely on others can create dependency, whereas self-accountability ensures that your results are consistent regardless of circumstances. The difference between someone who succeeds and someone who falters often lies in the ability to enforce their own standards when no one is watching. It is the daily reinforcement of your own rules that creates lasting transformation. Accountability also influences mindset. When you take responsibility for your actions, excuses diminish. The habit of reflection builds mental clarity and resilience. You begin to see patterns in your behavior, anticipate challenges, and plan for them. Cravings, lapses, and fatigue become signals to respond intentionally, not reasons to give up. This mental framework strengthens discipline, because discipline is the ability to act according to rules even when you don't feel like it. Accountability creates the feedback loops that train both mind and body to follow the path of consistent action. A key aspect of accountability is reframing setbacks. When you fail to follow a rule or slip into an old habit, it is easy to feel defeated. But accountability reframes these moments as data rather than failure. Each lapse becomes an opportunity to analyze triggers, adjust strategies, and reinforce habits. This mindset reduces guilt and prevents downward spirals that derail progress. It strengthens the ability to maintain momentum because you learn to return to the plan immediately rather than abandoning it entirely. The body responds to repeated consistency, not occasional perfection. And accountability ensures that the chain of action remains unbroken. Tracking habits visually or systematically reinforces this internal accountability. Whether it's a journal, checklist, or app, seeing your actions recorded daily creates a tangible connection between behavior and result. This simple act increases awareness, reduces passive decision-making, and solidifies your commitment. The more consistent the tracking, the stronger the internal feedback loop becomes, and the easier it is to maintain discipline even in the face of fatigue, stress, or temptation. Ultimately, accountability transforms fat loss into a predictable outcome because it aligns your actions with your intentions every single day. By taking responsibility, being honest, tracking habits, reflecting on results, and reinforcing your standards, you create an environment where your body and mind work together rather than against each other. Small daily rules, when enforced with consistent accountability, compound into meaningful change. The result is not just fat loss, but a strengthened identity, a disciplined mindset, and ability to sustain transformation because you've created a system where your actions consistently produce results.